They're all welcome. I see some are still maybe outside enjoying a bit of sun, but let us get ahead with the next session on setting the scene 1 year on. Thank you all for joining us here. So basically, this session is aiming to look back at the past year since the launch of the agreements that were mentioned earlier between the European Union, the GIZ, Get Invest, and Eswatini, and to see, thank you, and to see where what has happened in the past year. So last year, as you heard, there was the launch as well as a workshop which assembled the public and private sector in Eswatini to discuss really the basis of renewable energy, of what the landscape looks like here in Eswatini, and it focused as well on the different programs as well as on skills development and investment in the country. So today we would like to look into all these different aspects and the different stakeholders that have advanced this green transformation. I would like to maybe already invite the different panelists to the stage. If I may invite Luis Miguel Pascual, from Program Officer, Private Sector Development, Business Climate, Sustainable and Inclusive Growth, Delegation of the European Union to Eswatini. Can you please come. A warm welcome as well to Ferdinand Nel, Country Coordinator, Eswatini Country Window, GIZ. I have to practice this one. Warm welcome as well to Zwandile Zinisa. Thank you. Energy Officer from the Ministry. Simfile Khumalo? Gosh, sorry. General Manager, Regulation, Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority. Thank you. Nosifo Dlamini, there you go. Research and Renewable Energies Engineer, Eswatini Electricity Company. And last but definitely not least, Inati Dlamini, so CEO of Business Eswatini, who will join us in a minute. So, dear panelists, if I may actually jump right at it. Luis, if I may. Could you give us a picture of the different activities and achievements that the EU has been able to contribute to here in Eswatini, and maybe if you already want to share a little bit as to what's maybe in the pipeline after. Thank you. Do you have a mic?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for being here. Thank you for your question, Julia. So, us as European Union delegation, the biggest achievement of last year is, without any doubt, the approval of our new program on called Skills for Employment, Entrepreneurship, and Empowerment. 3 very important words. Tomorrow you will hear more in detail what this program will be all about, but basically working very closely with the private sector to create employment, also to create the conditions for people to create their own companies, but without forgetting the most vulnerable people and the ones that maybe for them it's more difficult to access the formal education, and we don't want to leave no one behind, and also to provide them the skills that they need to get to get an employment and also to start their business. Another that then Ferdinand will also talk a little bit the progress that we are doing in this program, more specifically. I will also like to highlight another support that we did in the country through another platform to the Bulembo Ministries. Thank you, Klaus, for being here, and we are supporting them to really have the investment to generate to have the donations and the funding to save something like $1 million in 8 years in electricity bills. And if you know the Bulembo project, you see that's something very important to the community. Also, I can also say that very soon, with our funding, the government will be launching a new call for proposals for renewable energy investments and energy efficiency in the project. So just stay tuned to all our channels, also the government channels, and you will see more details on that. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Ferdy, if you would like to share a bit on the work that you've been able to do, and yes, I'll give you the floor here.
Thank you, Julia. So it's still morning. Good morning or good afternoon. I've lost a bit of track of time. Program director and all important people in the room, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. 1 year on, what have we achieved? You've heard many times this morning what Get Invest does. Let's just go through it again. We mobilize private investments into decentralized investments, decentralized renewable energy, and we do that mainly through private sector mobilization and pipeline development. What does that mean? So under Get Invest, you've heard about 8 November on the left-hand side, a photo of the launch event. On the right-hand side, the workshop of 9 November, about 60 people attended. And there we discussed our dreams and what it is that we want to do. On 24 January 2023, we had the Renewable Energy Project Development Day. We thought, let's put an advert out. Let's try and find out who is here in Eswatini, small, medium enterprises playing in the renewable energy space. Ask them what is important to you. Why are you here? What's your dreams? Happy to say that we had about 15 interactions in 2 days' time. The next one is we were privileged to assist 3 people, also through the assistance of ARE, to attend the EAIF, Energy Access Investment Forum. It was held in Abidjan in Ivory Coast this year. The 3 people that attended, Constance, Mandla, and Mapovani, and they all made significant contributions not only to networking but also to a panel conversation that Constance chaired. On 17 and 18 April 2023, we were fortunate to attract 32 people representing 22 companies to a private finance and access to funding workshop being held at the Mountain View. There we spoke and thought a bit about project development, project finance, what are PPAs, and why are financial models important for financiers and for developers. We follow that up now in October and November with the Investment Academy, where we had 10 local companies, small and medium enterprises, that undergone in the Investment Academy, led by ARE, on a virtual basis, 2.5 days a week for three modules. Very successful so far. We've got a couple of those companies, more than half, today making pitches to investors and financiers, and I hold thumbs for them. And the last one on the Get Invest side is we were fortunate enough to launch a local tender to local entities. We signed a contract with SA Park 2 weeks back, and that is to develop a market insight, specifically a how-to guide for renewable energy developers on embedded generation. And that will be completed in May 2024, and you will read about that more later. So that's the Get Invest picture. I think what's important is, if you follow the agenda, just for the future, what we expect for the next year. Sebastian van Wolf will lead a discussion earlier or just after lunch today, and then also tomorrow on the role of Get Invest, Finance Catalyst, and our finance readiness support. Let's move to public sector. Get Transform, supporting partner countries to advance their energy transition via tailored policy. How do we do that? Through transformation support and knowledge sharing. So what did we do? First thing when we arrived is to do a desktop study and ask many questions and understand and form our own view of energy system transformation outlook for Eswatini. This is a very high-level document. It informs our thinking, it informs my work plan, and it's a living document, and we're in the process of updating that this month. The second thing we did in November 2022 is we had a capacity building workshop for the regulator and 2 people from the ministry, presented by the University of Cape Town Power Future Lab. 16 people attended. You see the photo there. We followed that up with a knowledge sharing workshop 27-28 June 2023 to capacitate the regulator and the grid code work group on grid codes. 13 people attended. We are fortunate now to in the process of doing 4 technical assistance projects for the public sector. The first one is the update of the Eswatini grid codes. That is a suite of 8 documents. We are working on 5 of them. The other 3 were updated by other entities in January 2023, and is done for ICERA and public partners with input from established IBPs. Our second project is support to the small-scale embedded generation work group. You've heard about that earlier. And if you're here tomorrow afternoon, you will hear all about it, with a role play between a customer, the regulator, and the utility. Please attend. The third one, update to the short-term generation expansion plan of Eswatini. The last version is dated 2018. There's a new energy master plan for 2050 that will be published early in this year, early in the new year. And we will take that and together with the public sector, publish a 10-year view of the generation expansions that needs to be done. And the last one, privileged, also mentioned earlier, to be involved in the review of the enabling legislation. That's the electricity law, the electricity regulatory law, and the Electricity Companies Act. Those are all dated around 2007, some updated 2016. But it's most important now that those laws speak to the new energy policy, which is dated 2018. Just a little bit view forward on Get Transform. We are in discussions with the regulator and the ministry for new key support projects. And we're also excited for a new grant agreement that Get Transform has signed with Sustainable Energy Africa. You will hear more about them from themselves later this afternoon. But that is in specific support of embedded generation and the regulatory development of that in the country. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much for this very comprehensive overview and many actions that have been taken on both of your sides, actually, the EU as well as GIZ Get Pro. Maybe now on the Eswatini side, yes. Would, sorry, practice still, Zwandile Zinisa, if you would like to present a little bit on how the ministry has seen this past year and its achievements.
All protocol observed. My name is Zwandile Zinisa. As our moderator said, I'm presenting on behalf of the Minister of Natural Resources and Energy with regards to the support that EU through the Get Transform project has provided to the ministry. For us, what EU has supported is with regards to the short-term generation expansion plan, as well as the review of the country's electricity legislation, which Ferdinand he rightfully put, was last enacted in around 2007, and we are currently at 2023. So this piece of legislation are outdated at the moment. The overview of my presentation, I will start with the energy master plan, then present on the short-term generation expansion plan, then look at what we are currently doing with regards to the electricity legislation. So with regards to the master plan, what we aim to do as a ministry is to look at the electricity space up to the year 2050, where we start by looking at the different demand sectors, be it your commercial, be it your residential, as well as industry, with a view to predict how the electricity demand will be going towards 2050. So what we also have to consider as we do that, we also look at the demographics regarding population growth. We also look at the GDP growth, where we know that the different sectors are expected to grow at different levels. With the support of different stakeholders, we are able to then focus the energy demand into the future. Once we have a clear picture of the demand, what we normally do is then look at the supply models, whereby we look at the different technologies as well as resources which are available in the country that can be used to satisfy whichever demand we may come upon in the future. So once we also have those, we look at the costs, where we aim to look at the least cost of electricity, whereby the cheapest technologies or resources are prioritized for development, so that we do not introduce any shocks to the economy. And then we develop some preferred scenarios from that. This master plan development is done through a team of local experts, which constitute mainly of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Energy. We also have officials from the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, which partner with the central bank to assist us in terms of GDP projections. We also have the Central Statistics Office, which assists with the demographics to see how the population will grow, thereby influencing the demand. We also have engineers from the Eswatini Electricity Company, as well as the Energy Regulatory Authority of Eswatini. With support from the International Atomic Energy Agency, we were able to then come up with the different scenarios, where they provided also the technical expertise from international experts who are assisting with the assumptions that we are making as a country. The support that we got from the EU is with regards to the development of the short-term generation expansion plan, which fits from the energy master plan that we develop. The energy master plan looks at projects that can be developed towards the 2050 horizon, but as a country, in order to have clear targets and timelines for development of technologies or resources, we then have to come up with a short-term generation expansion plan. And we are happy that EU, through the Get Transform project, has provided that support. At the moment, we have just started with the consultations, where some private stakeholders as well as the public stakeholders have been consulted with a view to make input into the model that they will use. So what is actually happening there, the consultants that have been procured by GIZ are looking at a number of parameters which include the transmission network, also trying to update the course, because the master plan was long established. but we have to update the course so that we have a clear picture of which technologies will be cheaper going forward. So once they have that, they are able to also prioritize the variable renewable energy technologies, which we are aware at the moment they tend to have negative impacts to the network. So the consultants will be able to assist us to look at how the network can be strengthened in order to achieve that. The focus on the variable energy technologies, including solar PV or wind, is because they are becoming more and more cheaper compared to the other technologies. So there will be more favor to ensure that the country has got an affordable tariff at the end of the day once the projects are developed. So now the consultant is busy with the data gathering, which will then be followed by the modeling. After modeling, we expect that sometime in January, we'll have a wider stakeholder consultation where also the private sector is expected to make an input with regards to the scenarios that will be preferred when the system is prioritizing. Then another project that GIZ is supporting us is with regards to the review of Eswatini electricity legislation, which is mainly the Eswatini Electricity Act of 2007, whose aim was to reform and consolidate the law regulating the generation, distribution, and supply of electricity. It also liberalized the generation, distribution, and supply of electricity, thereby allowing participation of other players besides the power utility. So previously, it was the power utility, EEC, which was responsible for all these activities. So in order to allow private sector participation, we then had to enact this law in 2007. Around that time also, there was an Energy Regulatory Act of 2007, which established the Energy Regulatory Authority, and also the Electricity Company Act of 2007, which was enacted to establish Eswatini Electricity Company in line with the company's activities. Previously, we had the Eswatini Electricity Board, which had to be converted to a company, and this act provided for the performance of the EEC of the powers and functions which had been performed by the SEP. Now, the need to review this legislation is that the legislation is now very old, so we need to ensure that the legislation in the sector is up to date and is able to factor in different advancements in the sector, be it technology-wise as well as the market structure, which is constantly changing. Some of the issues, for example, which border on private sector are with regards to the procurement issues, where we've seen that even though the country is trying to partner with private sector, those projects tend to take long to come into fruition. So we believe that this project will assist the country to try to remove those bottlenecks. Other issues may include the procuring entity, where it currently sits at the moment. It also needs to be looked at, and also the procedures that are being followed. On the one hand, we have the Procurement Act, which is being implemented by ESPPRA, yet also the Electricity Act mandates ESERA to do the procurement. So we have to also reconcile that. Also, with regards to the project agreements, before the procurement that began in 2018, there was a consultant that developed a number of project agreements, which are expected to assist the private sector as they develop their projects, one of which is the implementation agreement and also the grid connection agreement, as well as the power purchase agreement. With regards to the implementation agreement, we have seen that the allocation of risk is often deemed to be not balanced, such that it delays the implementation of the projects. The companies, they tend to come back to the government to say, why doesn't government assume a certain risk? And for government to do that, we need to go via a long process, which will culminate in getting cabinet approval. So there is a need maybe to review that so that that process is shortened and it will enable the ministry to go back to the procurement faster. So at the moment, with regards to the review, we have started with the public sector stakeholder consultations. We expect to have a wider stakeholder consultation in January, following which we will then submit the draft legislation to the Attorney General's office for vetting prior to submission to Cabinet and approval. After cabinet approval, we'll then submit to Parliament, following which then it will be submitted to the sovereign for royal consent. With that, I thank you.
Thank you very much for, again, a very comprehensive overview and a lot of actions that have been taken in the past year and a lot of developments in terms of updating and on really key points, as you pointed out, shortening process timings, etc. So really, thank you. If I may move on maybe to Simfiwe Khumalo, sorry. If you would like to share your views on the achievements in the past year.
Thank you and good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, our protocol observed. It seems I was timed to present at exactly 12 p.m. Simfiwe Khumalo is introduced from the Energy Regulatory Authority, and I think I'll just be giving an overview of what the regulatory environment is like in Eswatini, and specifically what has happened over the last 12 months, I think, since we had this engagement last year in terms of the regulatory environment. We do like to, I'm not sure if that's visible from your end, but perhaps the slide just gives an overview of the institutional framework in Eswatini. Essentially, it's just saying what are the roles of the different institutions in Eswatini. The ministry obviously being the policy maker in the electricity sector. And therefore, I think the previous speaker has spoken to how the ministry is looking into legislation, revising legislation, into energy planning, developing the master plans and so forth. And that then translates, I think, to what the rest of the sector must do. And the role of the regulator specifically then speaks to developing the relevant regulatory frameworks in line with those government policies that have been put in place. And some of us will be aware that the last essentially policy that was a review that happened and that is currently in place was in 2018, where most of our policies were reviewed. And that is the National Energy Policy, which is the key policy that we then follow to implement. But also the independent power producer policy as well as the energy efficiency policy. I must say, as the regulatory authority, our focus, I think, has been mainly on this IPP policy because it translates, I think, the key government policy of a liberal energy sector, specifically in the electricity industry. Speaking to how we bring in private sector to work with the public sector towards implementing solutions in the space. And I think that's what also the GET program is about. I mean, it's quite clear with GET Transform and GET Invest that the intention is that public sector and private sector must work together to implement quicker and sustainable solutions. So I think as regulator, that's what our focus has been. Our strategy is specifically focused on this aspect. And the the electricity market structure also, I think, speaks to that. I'm not sure how visible it is, but it does recognize the EEC as a vertically integrated power utility. But it also then says there are other actors and players that must then participate in the sector, particularly private sector, to generate power and supply EEC, but also supply customers, what we define as contestable customers, And it also speaks to the ability of those companies to also export power into the regional market as well. I think regional integration is key to the region addressing the security risks that we are facing as a region. And I think if we isolate ourselves, I think that has been the theme that we must get out of our silos. This applies, I think, to countries as well in terms of addressing the challenges we face as a region. So regional integration, and in particular power trade, is one of the key solutions I think that we must look at. And our market structure speaks to that as well. And I think part of what we have implemented as regulator also speak to then putting enabling instruments in place to allow this. A year ago, I think we spoke to some of these enabling regulatory frameworks that the regulator had developed. But we will give progress. I think with the first one, which is the small-scale embedded generation framework, I probably won't go into detail on this because I think there's a specific session tomorrow that will deal with this. But there has been some progress. There has been some challenges. But I'm not going to spoil the session for you tomorrow. And I do want you all to come back tomorrow. So I'm going to withhold a bit of information on that one, and hopefully everyone will join, will join us tomorrow for that session. The energy storage framework we didn't talk about last year because we hadn't begun the development of this. But this is important as well. Many of us will be aware that energy storage is increasingly playing, I think, a bigger role in the electricity sector, regionally at the moment, but obviously we are hoping this will translate into this playing a bigger role in Eswatini as well. So again, as regulator, following policy, we want to develop this framework to allow proper regulation of energy storage in Eswatini, and therefore just I think have a common understanding as players in the sector of how this is regulated. You will be aware that I think Eskom in South Africa a week or 2 weeks ago, I think they were launching one of their projects. I can't remember the exact capacities, but I think it's close to 100 megawatts of battery storage that was being launched by Eskom as part of, I think, 3 of their energy storage projects that they are bringing on board. So this technology is definitely something that I think is going to grow because it does address some of the challenges we face when it comes to energy storage. And also, in particular, I think grid stability as we bring in more of intermittent energy sources on board. So we have begun developing this energy storage framework. I think some of the local stakeholders will be aware because we've actually held already a stakeholder engagement on the development of this framework, which we believe should be complete beginning of 2024. The wheeling framework we spoke about last year, and again, this is to regulate the wheeling of power through the national grid. This is an important feature, I think, of the energy transition, and specifically allowing IPPs to sell power to customers in different locations, but also, as said, to the region in the Southern African power pool. So we completed development of the wheeling framework itself, but what is going on now is implementation. Essentially, we believe it's important that we then see these frameworks being put in place to test them and obviously to then work for the sector. So we are busy. There's a team with the utility that has been put in place to implement this. And the team, I think, has started working about a month ago. So we are hoping this time next year we'll see this framework working again for the sector. The grid code, I think at least 3 times it's been spoken about. And I've put a small icon there, a Get Transform icon, because I think it's been one of the projects that Get Transform has really been helping us develop. We started, I think it's been a phased approach. The first phase was to develop a connection code, which was completed, and subsequently then Get Transform joined in to then review all of the entire grid code to make sure that it's in alignment with what is happening in the sector at the moment. So we are busy doing this. I think Get Transform again has also is also assisting in developing a distribution network code, which was previously not part of our grid code. And that is to be completed in January 2024. It's at a very advanced stage, and we appreciate the assistance from GIZ on this. And the last one is a review of the tariff methodology. I think we spoke about last year, but we did put it on hold a little bit because some of the frameworks that we were developing were impacting on the tariff methodology. So we are now going on with that process again, and it should be completed in the first quarter of next year as well. And all of this is essentially meant to try and set, I think, clear regulatory guidelines in terms of who does what and how all the activities in the electricity sector are conducted. I think looking forward, we will be looking into electric vehicles, specifically speaking to charging of electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, how that is going to be regulated, both in terms of technical standards as well as the economics of it in terms of tariffs and so forth. So we will be doing that, I think, sometime from the middle of next year. We believe electric vehicles they are not going to come, they are here. I think last year we spoke about electric vehicles possibly coming to Eswatini, but now there are a number of examples that are here. I think 2 weeks ago we were in Namibia and our colleagues were the Energy Regulatory Authority there. We're speaking to the challenges they are facing because all of a sudden there's quite a number of electric vehicles and the standards and regulatory frameworks are not in place for this. And I think we will be facing a similar challenge soon if we don't deal with it. So sometime in the middle of next year, we will begin with the development of this framework as well. I think it's been said as well that the Energy Regulatory Authority has a specific mandate of procurement of independent power producers, or capacity rather, from independent power producers. And that has been going on as well. The solar was spoken to, 75 megawatts. It's at a very advanced stage. In fact, I think intention to award was issued. However, we are going through final negotiations for value for money. We believe that was important. That the tariffs should present value for money for the Eswatini economy in particular. So we are busy finalizing that particular part of this process. And we are hoping to see this come on board sometime, probably beginning of 2025, because they're still yet to go through and reach financial close. 40 megawatts biomass capacity. We are working on this. It's at an advanced stage as well. We issued requests for proposals early on this year, in February. And the closing date for the request for proposals is end of this month, November 30th. So I think from there on, obviously, there'll be evaluations going on, and hopefully that will lead to an intention to award as well. So we are happy to see these projects advanced. They are not advancing at the speed which we would like, but I think it's been good progress nonetheless. We are looking into wind power potential as well. We issued a request for, expression of interest to the market last year. because we wanted to test the extent of the capacity that can be developed, and I think the interest of the private sector again to invest in wind power in Eswatini. And I think the response was relatively good, and we saw the interest, and I think we have an idea of the capacity that can be developed, and I think the next step would be to issue an RFP for that technology. Guided by the ministry, there is consideration of small hydro as well, that I think we are planning on also issuing requests for proposals for IPPs to develop small hydro in Eswatini. I think I added a bonus slide. That speaks to the African Development Bank's Electricity Regulatory Index. So the bank developed this index, I think, starting from 2018, basically to assess the regulatory environment of the different countries in Africa in different aspects, being regulatory government, which essentially looks at the enabling legislation and the legislation that puts the regulatory authorities in place. And then it looks at regulatory substance, the extent to which regulators are in fact implementing according to the enabling legislation. And then regulatory outcomes, which essentially look at how effective regulatory decisions really are and what the regulator does. Last year, I think when I presented the slide, we were ranked, Eswatini was ranked 9th out of 43 countries that participated that year. We have gone back slightly to 12 out of 44 that participated in 2022. However, it's not the whole story because, in fact, we improved on almost every aspect. Even the overall index itself, I think we went from 0.6 to 0.21. I think that shows the work that has been put in trying to improve the regulatory environment. The fact that we have dropped in ranking, I think, is possibly a good thing because it means the entire continent is actually working towards improving the regulatory environment in the electricity sector. And again, I think if we improve as a continent, as a region, then I think we're better off, I think, as Africa moving forward. So it's not a bad thing if everyone is improving. So we regardless of the slight drop, we are happy, I think, with the outcome of this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
So thank you very much yet again. And a beautiful way of portraying actually all the effort that's put in the continent as well, not only in Eswatini. So thank you for that little note on top. But yeah, as everyone can see, a lot has been done on their side as well, from updating, as was mentioned earlier, to optimizing and even very smartly looking ahead as to what could potentially pose a problem and how can we address that ahead of time. So as the next speaker, please, Nosifo Dlamini, if you would like to say a few words.
Program director, or protocol observed. Someone said, I don't look like the picture, but I promise you it's me. It's me on the picture before. The program director said, be warned, this will be an intense session. He was right. Can you just please try to, hang on? Because at the end of the presentation, everyone will have a role to play in terms of this framework. So by the end of this presentation, you will know 5 things. You will be able to briefly describe what SSEG is, small-scale embedded generation. You will have a brief overview of what we discussed last year in terms of the road map. And then you will get an idea of where we are, the roadblocks that you are facing. Because as a power utility, we are supposed to implement the policies and the frameworks that come from the ministry as well as the regulator. So it's where the action is and where most obstacles are. So by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to just understand the roadblocks that you are facing. And we'll also just share the strategy that we have in terms of addressing that strategy. And at the end, I will also let you know how you can help as stakeholders to help us fully implement the SSEG framework. Okay, is this visible? Yeah, but anyway, just to explain what SSEG systems are. So SSEG stands for Small Scale Embedded Generator. An embedded generator is a generating unit that is installed by a customer, and it's embedded in the distribution network of the utility. So it's connected either to 11 kV or 400 volts in our case. And the customer, the main reason that they install it is for their own use. And at some point, they might sell excess. And in terms of small scale, it's now just categorizing. It's anything below 1 MVA. But for the purposes of today, I will just sometimes talk about embedded generation because we do not want to leave the technologies that are above 1 MVA. So these systems can be either solar PV, we have more solar, and then we can also have hydro also installed. So, okay, the pointer is not working, but if your eyes are still able to see, so you have a PV array, and then you have an inverter. What's important about the inverter is that we call it grid tied. It always has to work with the grid. It always has to be connected to the grid. If the grid goes down, as in EEC goes down, that system, unless it has a backup battery, it should then switch off. And somewhere there, if you can see, there's a bi-directional meter, and then you have the property. And you can have different types of systems. You have a ground-mounted and a rooftop systems on the side. So in terms of the framework, to those maybe, for the benefit of those who were not here last year we presented that Eswatini was seeing the observed, in fact, we were gaining traction in terms of adoption of the technology, yet it was unregulated, and in a way, those installations were illegally connected. So when I say illegally connected, I mean the installer or the property owner has not obtained approval from the EEC to connect on their grid. Inasmuch as they got a license, maybe for the from the regulator, but they don't have approval because EEC is the system operator. So that is where we were. And at the moment, we have an estimated figure of about 10 to 12%. It's those systems around the country and mostly located at agricultural areas. So last year, I explained that we had to operationalize the framework, meaning to try to get the systems legally connected and regulated. And hence the regulator came up with the SSEG framework, so we had to work in operationalizing it, meaning developing processes and systems to get the systems working and also abiding to the rules and regulations. And at some point, we had capacity building from Get Transform through the Sustainable Energy Africa. I see Mark on the other table. They had helped, yes, they helped a lot in helping us to, operationalize as a power utility, get systems, documents, requirements involved. And at this point, we also had a pilot project where we wanted to test the systems to make them work. So we selected about 6 sites to test the systems, and we had hoped that by today, the pilot project would be completed. And we had hoped that by the beginning of 2023, we would have begun the national rollout, meaning registering all systems to have them approved to connect to the grid so that we can ensure compliance. And it is unfortunate that we have not been able to get them fully connected because there have been challenges along the way. But there have also been a lot of learnings. So the first bottleneck or roadblock that we faced is in terms of a compliance issue. So most of the systems, in terms of the pilot, you have to have the system signed off by a professional engineer or technician to ensure that it is safe to connect to the grid. And unfortunately, we have not reached that point. It has been, I think, over 7 months, but we haven't reached that point. And the bottleneck is on the customer end. One, because we don't have, and I'll highlight it in terms of the skills gap, we don't have professional engineers in the country that are experienced in embedded generation in terms of DC, because you can have experience in AC, alternating current, but in DC systems, there are different risks altogether. So we've had that bottleneck. And the installers were looking for the professional engineers. They had to get them in South Africa. And with South Africa also having their load shedding, everyone is putting solar, and also everyone is looking for professional engineers to sign off their plant. It has been just a huge bottleneck. Anyway, the engineer came through and still found that the site is not necessarily compliant, and these sites are still working on rectifying the gaps or system deficiencies that were there. And so I've mentioned that we have the skills gap, and we also have a skills gap in terms of accredited installers, because I cannot just wake up just because I have a grade 2 certificate in terms of being an electrician and say I can install that's a generator, an embedded generator. So you need an accredited person. So we have noticed that we, as a country, we lack that, and I'll explain in the next slide on what we are doing with regards to that. And we've also noticed that there's a knowledge gap. The customers who are installing the systems have minimal knowledge about the technology. They have minimal knowledge about energy principles. For example, I think a speaker talked about energy efficiency. So if, just for your information, before you can install or before we can transition, we first have to be energy efficient. I've seen a shopping mall putting solar on their roofs. And when you go inside the shop, the fridges are all opened. So you are installing, you are making your system more expensive, yet you should first try to be energy efficient. So, and as they say, that energy efficiency is the first fuel towards a clean energy transition. So we've noticed that customers lack that knowledge in terms of what should come first. They just want solar, they just want a generator. And also, we've had the challenge of not being able to manage our grid. So when you introduce a generator on the distribution network or on the network, it introduces a layer of complexity in terms of power quality. So when most generator or most properties, you find that maybe they are off or their demand is low, the voltage on the system tends to rise up and also affects the other customers on the line. So that then compromises the quality of the network. So hence we need to rein in terms of the compliance issues. And also we have issues of safety risks. We have one site where they had a fire incident. So the site was not yet vetted for compliance. So 7 out of their 10 inverters, burnt down. So we are also trying to ensure that the systems are safe and less of an electrocution risk in terms of our personnel. So what we are doing to circumvent these challenges, thank you. We are now embarking on an embedded generation registration drive. So all customers who own the systems will now be encouraged to come to EEC and register their systems so that we are able to vet compliance and we are able to advise them as well. And then we're also embarking on an awareness raising drive to help customers to understand the risks of the systems, because if you can understand very well, a customer who has a bad experience with the technology is bound to, to spread a negative word about the technology. A customer who experienced, like the customer I just mentioned, who had experienced the fire, I'm not sure if their insurance is going to pay. You see, so that investment is now at risk. So we need, as a utility, we want to raise awareness and make customers or encourage customers to come to EEC and get their systems registered, or if they're planning to install, to request them to come and inquire from EEC the things that need to be done. And then, as to close in on the skills gap, we're also collaborating with the IVT, the Directorate of Industrial and Vocational Training, to help upgrade the installers to have the necessary accreditation. And then we also want to collaborate with financial institutions to have the approval process, the EEC approval process, as part of their due diligence in terms of when they're awarding loans for these systems. And finally, the call to action is that for EEC customers with existing systems, we ask you to come to EEC and register your systems, and to also obtain independent checks by a professional engineer to ensure that your system has been designed up to the highest safety and quality standards. And as well as installers, we are requesting you to familiarize yourself with the requirements from EEC, and as well as that you ensure you get an approval to connect before connecting that embedded generator onto the grid. And then financial institutions were requesting you to incorporate the approval system from EEC as part of your due diligence. And then as the business community, it's just to collaborate, because as I've mentioned, we have a number of gaps and we can't close them on our own. We need collaboration among stakeholders. And thank you for your attention. And that is a QR code where you can get all the information about the requirements before connecting your embedded generator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't worry if it doesn't work right now with the QR code. We will be sending out the slides after the forum. So yes, thank you very much for that as well, and for the calls at the end. So please, everyone, I hope you have all taken note of that. It also ties in nicely, actually, with the session we'll be having tomorrow on skills. Very important indeed. So thank you very much for that. I'm aware we're really late on time. So if I may just introduce the last speaker and at the same time maybe ask for the other speakers to already reflect as to one or two short points that you might say in terms of the main challenges. I mean, you've already addressed them, but the main challenges that you've faced in the past year, so we can wrap up hopefully in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Thank you. Nati, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I think when I finish, we go to lunch, isn't it? Okay, I'll be quick then. And if it's okay, can I just speak from here? Because I don't have. Okay. First of all, because I saw Nati's frustration, standing up and all that stuff, and which is very good. They're keeping time. It's very, very important. I'm from the private sector. If you're late by 5 minutes, it's a cardinal sin, okay? And I therefore want to apologize as a organizer that we're a bit late. It won't happen again, and it certainly is going to happen tomorrow. So please do come tomorrow. I have a surprise for you in the morning, so if you're on time. Yes, I do. And that's for real. But I just want to highlight just two key points, which I think is very, very important. Since we had our last meeting in November 2022. Firstly, I am acutely aware now that the regulator has just walked in. I wish I had gotten the mic just before he came in so I can say certain things. So I have to really bite my tongue on lots of things. But that being said, I can almost wax lyrical about the convergence of minds since the last conference, where regulator, incumbent provider, aspiring investor now are almost talking from the same song sheet. I mean, to me, that's a massive improvement than before, as all the time looking at each other, suspecting each other's intentions. I think now we realize that we are working for the same team, and it behooves us that we try to jointly organize our ideas and move them forward. And the situation of energy, in particular green energy, has become pressing of late. You will all be very much aware that this country in COP 2026, 27, they decided to nail their colors to the mast. And it wasn't just us, it was the government of the Kingdom of Eswatini via the Prime Minister, and said, I commit on COP 26 that this Kingdom of Eswatini will reduce, will remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere of 1,035,000 tons, metric tons, by 2030. Over 1 million metric tons of greenhouse gases, they're gone. And he said, as a country, as my CDC, what you call that, an NDC, my nationally determined contribution to COP27, over 1 million tons of greenhouse gas in 2030. And he did say, I will need some financing to get this done. And largely, I will be in partnership with the private sector, and we are doing our part, which is why we are organizing this. It's part of our contribution to that big national objective of that reduction. But at the same time, we have even a more pressing problem, that of shortage of energy within the region. Some of you have got a lot of money. I'm telling you, you will never go wrong. Invest in energy. And I'll tell you why. Africa is growing rapidly, and energy consumption is almost insatiable. We will never have enough of it in the region. If the population growth of 4% we're seeing going forward, even now, and I was complaining about the load shedding in South Africa, if they are complaining and the economy has been growing like 0.5% a year, do you know what would happen if okay, some of you have been hit by hailstorms. I'm thinking, did I park right outside? I've been hit too many times. And I said something, okay, the Lord approves. Thank you. What I was saying, if the economy has been growing at 3.5%, you talk about the load shedding that would be so terrible. They couldn't have coped. So that has been growing 0.5% all the year. Imagine if everything started growing normally. We will need more electricity. And I'm happy that EEC, with whom we work very closely, is alive to most of the issues. We share ideas and are moving forward. And I do not fear for the future for this country. I just wish that one day we can produce enough of it to export to the region. That's what I'm wishing for. And I think we're well on our way to achieving that. The other issue which it behooves you to be alive to it is this. I think it's only this country where the private sector is actually paying or subsidizing the consumer. I think we are all aware of that. And I will tell you what, almost 40% of the electricity I use at home, me and my family, is paid by a business. Anyone who's PTY Limited somewhere, they subsidize me. And it's been like that forever, right? And I want to congratulate the regulator who's been trying now, carefully, trying to get to a certain balance. Because once we get to that level of balancing in terms of the right pricing, it will open doors for this country, for corporations to invest in their own power generation, and for EEC to be able to, produce electricity and export. Right now, the subsidies are a serious problem. I'm not saying I'm not thankful for them, because I benefit, my family and I, but certainly it's something that at some point in time we need to address. If government had any money, I would say, okay, how much is worth the subsidy per year, so that I can just pay it on behalf of this, so that EEC can become fully commercial. But obviously, a government doesn't have that money. And I want us, as we discuss all of these issues, to be extremely alive to some of the impediments which stand in the room and which some of you are uncomfortable talking about because of certain reprisals. But with that said, Yulia and everybody, I think I will pause here and save some for tomorrow or this afternoon, whatever the case may be. And would you be so kind as to release us to lunch, please, Yulia? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And also, I believe on behalf of everyone in the audience, but also thank you for pointing out also the role of the private sector in advancing this green transition. So yes, as indeed requested, I will keep it very short, just summarizing in 2 lines. So yes, we've heard of everything that's happened in the past year. A lot has happened in the past year, from trainings, reforms, updates to regulation, as well as a lot more and stronger collaboration between all the different stakeholders in the country. Really important, I believe. And well, let's keep on going in this direction. We will hear, well, actually this is, I'll leave that to you, sorry. Skipping ahead. But yes, therefore, thank you all very much for your time and your overviews. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to Julia. May we please also give her a round of applause? That was brilliant moderating. I will not keep you from lunch. What I can assure you is that when we come back from lunch, we will be back on course in terms of our time. As you look at the program, we were supposed to go to lunch at about 12 and be back at 1:45. We will still go to lunch now and be back at 1:45. So we'll be back on course in terms of our program. Thank you very much. Lunch is served all the way in the restaurant. That is where we'll have our lunch. We will all fit in. Space has been dedicated for all of us. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.